Lara Elborno, who is a Palestinian-American international lawyer and the co-host of the Palestine Pod. She was a guest just a couple of weeks ago, and she was a sensation. The viewers loved what she had to say and how she said it. Then we were looking forward to the decision of the ICJ here in The Hague last Friday. Let's hear from her what she thought about what happened on Friday and what's happened next. Lara, welcome back to the show. A very warm welcome. You were a very popular guest last time. Now, I think I'm right in saying that the judgment was a stinging, heavy judgment, one which in ordinary times would have kept us talking for weeks. But now it's actually been overtaken by so many dramatic events. There's a danger, isn't there, that its importance will be lost. What do you say?
Thank you, George, for having me again. Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And for that reason, I first want to start by mentioning that the single most important thing that we must all be doing in this moment is continuing in the global movement to push for an immediate permanent ceasefire, and continuing also to keep our eyes on Gaza and Israel's genocidal assault, which is now in its 113th day. And I say this because in the 24 hours since the rendering of the ICJ order, Israel killed roughly 200 people in Gaza. It's been sieging and attacking Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis, where the doctors have been tweeting out to the world, asking for assistance and begging the world not to let happen to them what happened to the doctors at Al-Shifa Hospital and so many other hospitals in Gaza. Israel has also issued another genocidal evacuation order seeking to push people even further south, so from Khan Yunis to Rafah, and create a bottleneck. And Rafah, as we know, is already at the point of catastrophe, suffering from severe overcrowding and the spread of disease. And many people, including children, continue to die from the cold, die from starvation, die from disease on a daily basis. And at the same time, we see Israelis now protesting at the Karam Abu Salam crossing to ensure that food and basic supplies and medicine are not reaching Gaza. So the factual developments on the ground continue to be more and more catastrophic every day. And with that said, I will comment on the court's decision. And I think in order to properly comment on it, we actually have to begin with what the decision is. And so to summarize, essentially, the court rejected every single one of Israel's legal arguments on the existence of a legal dispute, on the existence of irreparable prejudice and urgency, which of course we know is required in order to order provisional measures, and also on the plausibility of the rights requiring protection. And the court affirmed that it had jurisdiction in this case, that it was plausible that Israel was in violation of its rights under the Genocide Convention. The court affirmed that this case will go on to a merits phase. And as to the provisional measures, the court ordered in an overwhelming majority, either 15-2 or 16-1, depending on the measure, several provisional measures, notably ordering Israel to take all measures to prevent genocide, to immediately ensure that its military does not kill or wound people in Gaza or inflict destructive conditions on them. And Israel was also ordered to prevent and punish incitement and to allow all humanitarian aid into Gaza, save evidence, and report back to the court within 1 month. And at which point the court may decide to impose even further provisional measures on Israel if it finds that Israel is not in compliance with these measures. So it's really important for us to keep in mind that even though we've heard Israel and the US try to spin this as a win for Israel, that's simply delusional. They lost essentially almost everything. They lost all their legal arguments, and South Africa were granted the majority of the provisional measures that they requested.
Were 6 demands, if you like, that the court made of Israel. Summarize them for us, if you will.
Yeah, so essentially the court ordered Israel to take all measures, not reasonable measures, all measures to prevent genocide, and to, with immediate effect, ensure that its military does not commit any of the genocidal acts under the convention, which includes killing and wounding Palestinians, and also inflicting destructive conditions of life on them. Israel must also prevent and punish incitement of those politicians which are committing incitement to genocide. And Israel was also ordered to allow all humanitarian aid into Gaza, save evidence, and report back to the court within 1 month.
Now, they have brazenly defied that, despite being a state party to the convention, despite having a judge sitting on the bench, despite being a member state of the United Nations. And of course, if these were normal times, if this was a normal country, one would expect punitive consequences. But what do you do with a state party to the convention that continues immediately to defy not just the terms of the convention, but an actual specific judgment handed down to them?
Yeah, and of course, this is the most frustrating part, right? We know that Israel vowed to ignore the ICJ's order before it was rendered, and since it was rendered. Many statements were made by Israeli government officials confirming that they would not be complying with the order. Ben-Gvir even tweeted Hague shmague moments after the order was rendered. So that certainly leaves us with the question of, okay, well, what's the utility of such an order? And I think here, we need to remind people that there's simply no combination of words that the court could have used which would have resulted in Israel stopping its genocidal onslaught, simply because Israel does not care what the court has to say. It has, as I mentioned before on the show, ignored previous decisions of the International Court of Justice completely. And so then, personally, I think the only utility then in the order is two things. One, it will ultimately change the rhetoric in terms of cementing Israel as a genocidal regime, which is to the benefit of the long-term Palestinian freedom struggle. And then two, it puts third states on notice of the risk of genocide in Gaza, which then will trigger their own obligations under the Genocide Convention to prevent genocide and also not be complicit in it. And this can, with appropriate pressure from the grassroots, eventually get states to condition or suspend funding or the provision of arms to Israel, which is necessary in order for us to reach the point of a permanent immediate ceasefire. This previously was not possible. If you remember, weeks ago, I don't remember how long ago exactly it was, when Bernie Sanders put forward his proposal to condition or review even the provision of arms and funding to Israel on the basis of their compliance with human rights. It got 11 senators to support it. So, I mean, this is such a huge taboo in the United States that we really need some legal hook that we can attach to in order to be able to push this forward politically.
Well, my apologies for difficulties with my sound. Lara, I think, was loud and clear, and wasn't she? She was summarizing the judgment that was made on Friday at the ICJ and had moved on to beginning to adumbrate the consequences that have flowed. So if Lara's still with me, and I'm in a makeshift studio, thanks to my good friend Faisal, so I'm not actually able to see her. But if Lara's still with me, Lara, I was just saying that I didn't expect Israel, of course, to abide by the judgment, but I thought it would inhibit Israel's allies, foremost amongst them your country and mine, in carrying on business as usual. But that doesn't seem to have happened, does it?
No, actually, within 24 hours of the ICJ order being rendered, we had several Western governments, led by the US, Canada, and the UK, cut funding to UNWA, which is the UN agency for Palestinian refugees and the single largest provider of aid and services on the ground in occupied Palestine. And it cannot be, overemphasized the extent to which this is going to have disastrous consequences and lead to the killing of Palestinians on the ground today in Gaza who are already beaten down and starving and displaced and have been undergoing hell for over 113 days now. And we have to keep in mind that this goal of Israel to destroy UNRWA is not something that, popped up yesterday or the day before, as a result of the allegations that now Israel is trying to, put forward. This is something that Israel has wanted to do for a very long time. There were even statements from Israeli officials from a month ago, from 2 months ago, saying very clearly that Israel would not win this war without destroying UNRWA. And part of the reason that is because UNRWA is responsible for maintaining the refugee status of Palestinians. And therefore, it's inherently linked to their legal right to return to their homes in what is now Israel. And so for Israel, destroying UNRWA is a means of it having, it would allow it to essentially get rid of all of these Palestinian refugees, at least, administratively, at least in terms of in name, and it would allow it to further entrench its settler colonial agenda. And so this is something that we have to reject completely. And I just want to emphasize the extreme hypocrisy and double standards by the US and these other countries that have joined it in such a move. Instead of sanctioning Israel in the wake of the ICJ order, which clearly put those countries on notice that by continuing to support Israel, they too are violating the Genocide Convention, they did the opposite. They sanctioned the people who are undergoing the genocide themselves, and it's truly shameful.
Isn't that in itself a genocidal act prosecutable?
Oh, absolutely. I believe it was Francis Boyle, the Professor Francis Boyle, who previously worked on the genocide case having to do with Bosnia, that tweeted or he put out a public statement saying that this now is actually a genocidal act under the convention. It's creating conditions of life on the ground that will deprive Palestinians of the means to continue living. And so therefore, it's also a direct violation of the Genocide Convention. And let's not forget that the US has already been sued for complicity in genocide through the provision of arms and financing and diplomatic protection in US federal court. That was a lawsuit brought by the Center for Constitutional Rights and Palestinian plaintiffs whose families were massacred in Gaza, and they had a hearing last week as well in that case. And so therefore, the US is either at a minimum complicit, if not completely directly committing a genocidal act at this point in time.
Now, at the end of the month, Israel was given 1 month to, as it were, show that they had complied. What happens if they just don't turn up, if they just don't submit a report? Is that likely that that's what they will do?
It's very likely. In fact, if you remember in 2004, when the International Court of Justice was reviewing the legality of the wall that Israel built on occupied West Bank, Israel turned up for the phase having to do with jurisdiction. But once the court affirmed that they had jurisdiction, then Israel refused to participate in the proceedings, and the merits phase continued without Israel present. Israel often boycotts international tribunals or areas or venues which may seek to hold it accountable. So it's possible that it may not even show up to submit a report. I can't say. Or they may try to submit a report saying that they're doing everything they can, while in fact the reality on the ground shows us very clearly that that's not actually the case. And we will continue to see the same images and videos that we have been seeing for the last 3.5 months, essentially maintaining this alternate reality that Israel lives in, where they are just the good guys and we're all, crazy and don't know what we're talking about. So they may show up, they may not. I think the important thing to keep in mind is that the court at that point has told South Africa they would have an opportunity to respond in any event, and that the court may seek to impose even further provisional measures if they see that Israel is acting defiantly and in total disregard for the court. So that's also something that we should continue to push the global conversation on the immediate permanent ceasefire, because even though the court didn't expressly order a suspension in Israel's military activity through this order, it doesn't exclude the possibility that they could do so in 1 month. Now, of course, this is not the results that people on the ground want to hear, because they need this today. They've needed this every single day before today. But I'm here to comment on what the court is able to do, from this point on. And so while that's wholly insufficient in terms of what is actually needed on the ground, that's something that we should also keep in mind. But this also underscores that really it's on the people. It's on the people worldwide who have been mobilizing to continue mobilizing and to continue to put pressure. This court was never going to save us with its order. The order is only a tool that we can now use in our political mobilizing efforts to continue to push for the change that is needed. But in and of itself, it's not capable of producing that change if we don't use it in the strategic ways that we need to be using it.
Well, you say the people who've been mobilizing, according to Nancy Pelosi on American television today, these people may actually be in the pay of Vladimir Putin. That takes the unhinged Russiagate affair into another universe, doesn't it?
George, I watched that clip right before I came on, and I was actually at a loss for words. I mean, the level of delusion that is in the halls of Washington, the level of just complete misunderstanding, either it's negligence or it's willful, arrogance and refusal to see what is right before them. I don't know what it is exactly, but it is completely divorced from the reality on the ground in Gaza. It's completely divorced from the motivations of billions of people who have been mobilized trying to stop this genocide of Palestinians in Gaza, because every single day for 3.5 months, we have watched on our phones children be massacred, families be pulled from the rubble. And this has understandably awakened something human in us, which tells us that this is not a world that we want to live in, a world which allows the slaughter of now 13,000 Palestinian babies and children. To dismiss that human reaction as, oh, these must just be some paid Russian operatives with absolutely no factual basis whatsoever, just an allegation like that made by Nancy Pelosi on primetime television. It's so irresponsible. In fact, it's criminal. We cannot continue to allow these elected officials to get away with this type of framing. It's actually criminal.
Well, she said she's sending the FBI after those people who've been mobilizing. It is indeed criminal. But going back now to the case, if I may, Israel is arguably all ready, but if they didn't show up in a month or didn't report any remedying of the situation in a month, they're arguably in contempt of court. In layman's terms, that's what we call it here anyway. The next step would presumably be the issuing of arrest warrants for Israeli officials, wouldn't it?
Well, I mean, that's a step that should have actually taken place long ago. If you're speaking about the International Criminal Court did not need a finding by the International Court of Justice in order to proceed to issue arrest warrants for Israeli officials. That's something the prosecutor could have done long ago. And in fact, he was urged to do long ago by Palestinian NGOs, by politicians worldwide, by states who referred the matter of the Gaza genocide to him. A number of states did so, calling on him to issue arrest warrants for Israeli officials many months ago. And he still has not done absolutely anything to respond to those growing requests for him to act. And so, therefore, there's a tremendous amount of critique right now, and it continues to evolve about the behavior of Karim Khan, wondering if he is compromised, because his behavior simply is not consistent with the behavior of a prosecutor that would be acting in a reasonable manner to uphold his mandate to prevent and sanction mass atrocities like genocide, because he's simply done nothing to actually respond to this ongoing genocide. So whether or not
I'm
now...
I'm here in The Hague looking for Mr. Khan, but he is avoiding me. As a matter of fact, I know him, but that hasn't stopped him avoiding me. And if I can, I'll find him and put a microphone under his nose. But while we've got you here and you are an international lawyer, can I ask you just one adjacent question? I said in my monologue, I hope it was able to be heard, that Joe Biden deliberately said these American soldiers who were killed and wounded today, he deliberately lied that they were killed and wounded in Jordan, rather than where they actually were killed and wounded in Syria, where, I'm arguing, the United States presence is an illegal one, whereas their presence in Jordan, for some reasons best explained by the Jordanians, is a legal presence. The difference being that in law, the United States could legitimately and lawfully respond to an attack on its forces in Jordan, but would be acting illegally in responding to an attack on their illegal presence in Syria. Have I got that right?
You know, George, I'm not sure that that distinction even matters, because when has it ever stopped the U.S. To know that they're acting illegally? I mean, the invasion and occupation of Iraq was illegal for all intents and purposes, and the U.S. has never actually changed its behavior in accordance with what is legal or lawful. It has participated in many illegal aggressions and occupations. So I don't know that that's necessarily what's behind this characterization.
Maybe he just can't read the maps. That's always a possibility. Sorry,
Yes.
I said lastly, Lara, but really, I promise lastly. The decision of the court here in The Hague on Friday seems to me to make the action of the Yemenis illegal action on the basis that it is an obligation on anyone to stop what appears to be a genocide by any means in their power. That would render the Yemeni action in the Red Sea legal, and the British and American punitive expedition against Yemen, again, entirely illegal. Have I got that right?
Yes, I think so. I think that's a fair characterization. And then that leaves us in this absurd reality where the fact that these Western governments have now relisted the Houthis as a terrorist organization puts us in this, alternate reality where people who are presumably doing what is necessary to comply with international obligations to prevent genocide have been characterized as terrorists, and other people who may speak out to support such action may then even find themselves prosecuted or arrested or interrogated on account of supporting terrorism. And so this is the absurd reality that we live in today.
It is Alice in Wonderland. It's through the looking glass and down the rabbit hole. Lara, as always, I'm very grateful to you, especially given the technical problems that I've been having. Thanks for sticking with us and answering so eloquently the questions that everyone in the audience will be thinking and asking. Lara Elborno, thank you for joining us on the Mother of All Talk Shows.